Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Today is Tuesday, September 20th, 2022, and it's 1 p.m. We're gathered for the school board briefing meeting, and I will welcome you all here. First on the agenda is our change orders with Scott Rickenbacker. Sorry.
Good afternoon, board members. Dr. Bernier, Esquire, Dupuy Bruno. This is your August of 2022 monthly change order report. As you'll notice on the front sheet, we engaged in $290,964 of direct material purchase orders with a tax savings return to the district of $16,540. Non-material direct purchases of $357,619, and the amount of return was $357,619 to the district. We had contingency adjustments in the amount of $129,767. The supplemental backup sheet, I would like you to take notice. You'll see a lot of $0 change orders. These are time extensions, and these were for a lot of the single point entry projects, and what that is material delays. Unfortunately, we're going to see that more and more on all of our projects, but I wanted to make mention to you that this was the first wave where we tried to get long lead ahead of it, and even still some things are just so long lead that they didn't make it to the opening day of school, so we had to give contract extensions. Are there any questions?
Board members, any questions? Ms. Jordan.
Thank you. So the report number 2, the non-direct material purchase, so that has been returned, but that is just kind of like on hold, correct, for when we need to reuse it?
Correct.
Mr. Rickenbacker. You have a great day. Great. Next on the agenda is the proximity plan update. And in order to get that, we'll welcome Dr. Adam Malloy. Dr. Adam Malloy.
Madam Chair?
Yes.
Dr. Malloy is here to help consistently communicate with all of you as board members regarding some of the work that we have upcoming with the proximity plan. As many of you know and have been in attendance and truly appreciate, the town halls have been a part of this discussion. We've done a nice job of preparing a baseline expectation for our community that we're going to have to look at things like proximity, choice, transportation, grandfathering, and now those town halls will shift into more of something called community dialogues. Adam Malloy and a group of representative administrators that he represents have been working behind the scenes, preparing for those meetings and getting ready to provide an update on where we think we're going to be prior to those conversations with our elementary and middle school parents. I want, for the record, for people to understand that the high schools are not part of this process, and we are looking at both elementary and middle with, again, our desire to be open to what our community feedback is. So Adam will give you an idea related to how we're planning to proceed, and then I'll have some closing comments, and then we look forward to your discussion this afternoon.
Thank you, Dr. Bernier.
Thank you, board members. Can everybody, this is on, good? Yeah, so I think that this is very important for us just to provide an update about where we are as it relates to the proximity conversation. The purpose of today is really just to provide an update around that conversation for elementary and middle schools. The term conversation is a bit informal from all the work that has been done, and I would be remiss if I didn't also state that this is really a level set for authentic engagement around the plan, and that this conversation has been and will continue to drive policy work at the district level. We do have a committed team that is driving some policies and building pathways so that when the community and our task force and when we eventually come to the board, that we have that authentic connection with the community as it relates to some very important topics, themes, and issues related to changing a system that has been in place for 15 years. I think that this is a much higher level continuation of the work that's been done since 2020. And I don't want you to think that any of that has been moved aside. In fact, we've used that history and that guidance with us as we've moved forward. So as we've put together a new team with a new timeline and focus for authentic engagement, 1, to do this with the community, 2, and then to devise a plan that we as a district think is best for our students and schools, we've carried all of that with us since 2020. So just an agenda for the update. We're going to go over, Dr. Bernier, the town halls, the feedback that we received. None of it, I think, will be shocking to you guys because we hear it on a daily, weekly, monthly basis. Additional community engagement, and I think that this is where we are going to get a little bit uncomfortable as it relates to some topics of change. But we need to be connected with our communities, and we're going to use our past experience and connection with groups, organizations, principals to really be targeted about 3 particular areas, right? Those are changing the zones, reducing the size of those zones, transportation, who can we as a community, right, the extent of which we will transport, and then grandfathering. Who gets to stay for how long, and if transportation is provided. All right. The dialogue and task force considerations, those are those 3 that I just mentioned, and then we do have some next steps, which really are kind of like a potpourri of what the team is working on now and what the team has been building since August, ready to activate, ready to green light, so that if the community says, yeah, we want, this very restrictive policy, zone, transportation, everything, then we can hit go. Right, and in our system that we have to load a lot of student information, we have to load a lot of boundaries, we have to do a lot of work behind the scenes. So we're trying to build that, different pathways for the community and us to go together. The focus of the town halls, as you guys know, because many of you were in attendance, was to introduce Dr. Bernier in a town hall fashion. A traditional kind of listen, learn, lead approach. And I think that they were very successful from my standpoint in that we had hundreds attend, but we also had district personnel in attendance that this was, in a way, kind of a different step with the community. And I think that was very important, that they saw that not only was Dr. Bernier going to do this with them, but that executive level staff, all the way down to coordinators from the central office, principals, were there as well. And that they saw that we were going to be active, we were going to be visible, we were going to be present, and we weren't going to lead from the office. And I think that was very important from the town halls. They were a lead-off hit so that we could set the stage for continuing these neighborhood dialogues, continuing these community engagement opportunities. Dr. Bernier went over his why, his values, went over briefly the entry plan, and then a project focus on proximity. Okay, the feedback, which we set up very general, was what was working, what can I do to make improvements in the short, long term, and then what keeps you up at night? And that feedback that we received, and we processed, charted it all, right? A lot of it had to do with our systems. Okay, one of those systems in particular, which I'm updating on, is the student assignment system. So in terms of that feedback, okay, it really encouraged us as district leaders for system analysis and reform. I did put up a number of bullets that just kind of I took from the charted notes that we took at the town halls. Our assignment process, school planning, start times, transportation. I think one of the most room silencing question and answers at the town halls was at San Carlos Park Elementary, where the father asked Dr. Bernier, when will this bus system improve? Can I expect my child to get home sooner, right? And as honest as he could, Dr. Bernier said, I don't know if I can tell you that, sir, right? This is a system issue. Well, can't you hire more bus drivers? Yes, but we're continuing to add more students, right? We're continuing to add more schools. That complicates the entire system. I referenced last time when we were presenting with the team that I do believe that we're getting close to a tipping point in terms of what the district can do as it relates to getting kids to school on time. Dr. Bernier and staff shared that over 2,000 students are late to school every single day, not the same ones. That is unacceptable for a system. All right, and so that's where this really is an encouragement for system analysis and reforms, a transformation really for how we look and talk about our transportation, right, in our choice, which we tend to think as somehow eternal objects that are just kind of complicating things. But we really have to look at them as just simply byproducts of a student enrollment system that can be addressed, that can be, changed and reformed, and that can be improved. Now I'm going to get into a little bit of the feedback. We didn't have as many respondents. Up here I took an early snapshot from last week. We did have, maybe around 40 to 50 respondents. All of the answers really didn't change. I just kind of took the first 3 questions so that you guys could get an idea that there's some really interesting approaches to our student assignment system. But I think that there's a really important takeaway for us as a district as well, one that reflects very kindly on our schools, our school leaders, and the culture that they build at their buildings. The first question asked, is the student enrollment process efficient? Right? Efficient, is broad and open to interpretation, but you can see where we are on that one. That is strongly disagree. The next question asks, I actually understand how the assignment process works. One thing that I did want to parallel is that the responses were right around kind of 50%, either agree, disagree, or strongly disagree. And this actually matches some of what we see in terms of participation in open enrollment. Right? That's a really key component in our system, is that if you don't participate in open enrollment, right, you're not actually participating in our system. You are being given then an assignment based on capacity. And I think that that's really important to note, that these numbers about understanding kind of parallel. Now this feedback, survey data is open and you can go in a lot of different directions. But one of the things that kind of first looked like a contradiction to me, but then it made sense, is that I am satisfied with my children's current school assignment. And you see the flip here, that the majority of people that responded, and that this draw was really built for those that were critical friends, that they were actually satisfied with their school assignment. And I think that this takeaway for me is very, very important, because while our system is complex, inefficient, and people are generally unsatisfied with it, they're happy with the school that they're at. That tells me that we have a bevy of schools across the board that parents are generally happy with, right? We built the platform for them to come and be critical, and yet they were still very happy with the school that they're assigned at. And what that tells me is that when we're looking at a system change, we have to feel comfortable being able to tell parents, well, what you formerly perceived as maybe not being happy, or you wouldn't be happy at this school, parents are generally very happy at this school. And I think that was a takeaway for me, because I wanted to give you guys both the good and the bad from the survey, but this contradictory piece here, it didn't give support necessarily to continuing on a system, right, of enrollment, but it does give us support for continuing on the work in our school buildings by our school leaders. Now we are going back out for additional community engagement. Dr. Bernier mentioned some specific neighborhood dialogues. That communication material is being prepared and should be out this week. We are looking at James Stevens, North Fort Myers Academy of the Arts, and Heights Elementary, and you can see that those dates are there. That is going to be specifically tied to those 3 areas and considerations for proximity. Okay, the zones, the grandfathering, and the transportation piece. Really, from this first phase of engagement, we are looking to develop a community task force that will be able to give us even more direct recommendation on those 3 key areas that I mentioned. We will be promoting, this work this week. And Dr. Bernier, this was not just, his first kind of, town halls and done, right? Check off the box and done. We also encouraged, work with some community groups. We have Southward Village and then the collaboratory community event in October, and that work will continue. So, the executive office and district staff will continue to work with the community, maybe not always Dr. Bernier, but also us out there working with the community so that we can go together, right? I did want to mention that for these dialogues, right, this isn't going to be a blanket kind of, come if you're interested, meet the superintendent, complain or critique if you want to. This is going to be targeted at a lot of our community organizations that we've already presented at. So very strategic communication to those groups that we've already presented at on proximity so that we can get their involvement as it relates to specific policy questions. So I did want to mention that, whether it was those PTA groups or whether those realtor associations or really those chambers, Kiwanis, civics, churches that we did proximity work at before, we're going to reach back out and say, hey, this is happening right at this school, and we really could use your engagement again. Right? We appreciate your engagement before, and we would really like your engagement again. And that work continues to develop. And so while we just have kind of September, October, I wanted this update to really be a focus about, what we've done in the past month and then what we're doing in the next two, right? Because we know that the timeline is condensed. Now, you guys are familiar with the continuum of options. We have the school district of Lee County on the least restrictive. We have everyone else probably closer to the most restrictive. We know that we need to get in a better system position as it relates to assigning our kids and then getting our kids to school. Right. The community and best practices from other school districts will really guide this. And I think it's important, while we may not meet exactly in the middle, we do make system improvement moving towards the right. Dr. Bernier joked at the town halls that the right gets him, maybe removes him from office or packs the board office. Maybe going, a little bit closer to the right doesn't. Maybe it actually makes sense. And I think that's, sometimes we get a little scary to say that one of our systems could actually be logical and make sense and connect with people, but I think we have an opportunity to do that. And so going back out there with some exact considerations, I think is very important. These are the three very straightforward questions that the neighborhood dialogues and the task force will be looking at. In terms of grandfathering, which students should be grandfathered to their current school, their choice honored in the current system, what level of transportation should be provided, and which zones are preferred. There was another conversation with Dr. Bernier and a stakeholder at the town hall in which they were being very emphatic about, proximity and doing something that made common sense. And then Dr. Bernier responded, well, would you be okay then with us moving your child from their current school? Right? Because that is the question. Anytime we move towards more restrictive, going from the least restrictive, you are going to be dealing with a large amount of displacement. Okay. And I don't say that lightly, and I think that we all can appreciate and understand the historical boundary work. In fact, we were having a conversation last Friday with two people that were involved in some of that boundary work. And while they were very supportive of what we were doing, they also understood the weight and the pressure that was behind that. In terms of grandfathering, right, I just mentioned that the level of displacement increases as you go towards more restrictive. And I think today it would be nice perhaps to hear your guys' conversation in dialogue and leadership as it relates to these three key areas, almost as a preview of what our neighborhood dialogues in our community will be tackling with, right? Will students get to remain? Will we honor our stakeholders' current choice in the current system, some of which have worked really hard to secure that? Right? You've got to keep in mind that when you talk to school PTAs, when you talk to family members and stakeholders, they believe that they've locked something in through their hard work through our system. And I think that that's very important. Now, one of the things that I think that we also have to consider here, and I'm not going to read through all of them because they all kind of go together, but is the transportation piece. There is something that our team's working on, a sequencing, a modeling to try to get a really efficient process for how it could work. So we could honor if the community and leadership takes us in this direction, but we may not have to provide transportation. And we can model it in a way in which we can address some of the capacity issues that might arise. Now, I know it seems somewhat confusing to run, two consecutive systems for elementary and middle. I would agree with you, but I do expect that there might be some level of that as we move forward. In terms of transportation, I did put Florida House Bill up there. I think it's very important to remember that the state allows for open enrollment to any school as long as there is capacity and as long as you can provide your own transportation. They have a very least restrictive choice open enrollment policy as long as there's a spot. If I wanted my son to go to Sarasota Riverview, I could provide transportation as long as there was capacity. Same thing in our district, right? We tend to think of it east, west, south, but if there's capacity and you want to cross subzones, by state statute, you're allowed to do that. So that's something that I think will continue on as that always present choice element. And I think that was communicated very well at the town halls. It's like, we're not looking to take away your choice. The state has provided choice eternal, as long as there's space and you can provide transportation. Now, transportation is interesting because you start to tie it in with some of those pathways. Whether it's grandfathered students, whether it's lottery assigned students within smaller zones, or just residentially assigned students. In talking with transportation, the more we reduce the size of the zone, the more we strategically reduce the number of schools we assign to, the more efficient our system becomes. Because then you start to eliminate transportation options for a large number of kids. Now, this is not taking into account hazardous road conditions, ESC transportation. All of that will remain, right? But if you get smaller, you are dramatically addressing, I think, some of the transportation issues that we have. Just to Dr. Bernier's narrative of getting on a bus right next to Ida Baker, passing 4 high schools to go to North Fort Myers High, and one bus right after the other in a row that picked Dr. Bernier up was going from North to Mariner to Cape to Baker, right there. It was happening, as he saw it live time. So I do think that level of transportation is something that our team is looking at. And while we haven't developed any non-negotiables, right, because we're doing this with the community and with leadership, there's certainly some things that we could do from a transportation standpoint, going from a bus driver shortage to a bus driver surplus, just in a quick policy direction. Lastly, the zones. This is very important because we're continuing the work that was done by Davis Demographics and our internal teams. We do, like I said, have pathways ready to go. We have smaller choice zones. We have one-to-one attendance zones. If you're assigned based on your address to one school and then you enter a smaller choice zone, we have those pathways as well. We wanted to kind of be very upfront and ready with a focus, kind of maybe a deadline with focus. So we've been very focused on, well, pun intended, sorry, that was off script. We've been very focused on getting the student boundary information, the map boundary, the geolocation stuff, all of that ready to go, so that once we get to a final draft and presentation to the board, and once the community has said, yes, we would like you to go down this route, then we certainly have those things ready to activate. I would be kind of disrespectful to my own historical work in our area if I didn't also mention the Blaylock case, which was like our Brown versus Board of Education, 1964 to 1999, then with a 5-year supervisory period after that. That does lead us into the current choice system. So using history as a guide, I think, is very important. And when I first started getting into student assignment work, I thought that if we could simply control or mechanize the system to hit diversity levers, we could do a better job. But I actually think by getting smaller and more strategic, we could have much more control over the student populations. And so I am doing that work, and I wanted to add that in because I wanted to honor the history and legacy of Blaylock, which I wrote my master's thesis on, and then my doctoral degree following the impact of Blaylock and the unitary status. So that is very important, and that is something that we are looking to have that conversation with community groups all across Lee County. I did say that this was a bit of a potpourri of next steps. I just wanted you to see that this is what we're calling it, proximity red zone. We would like to get a new system across the goal line with your assistance, with the community support. These are some of our next steps, some of which have already been completed. I just put in there our September and October kind of to-dos and things that the team is working on. To draw your attention to a few of them. The last two, the additional meetings, task force, and then the direction really on the policy surrounding grandfathering, transportation, and the new zones. One in there, each person is assigned kind of a few of these tasks. I do want you to know that this is something that is a district system and that is that district leaders are responsible for. So I've really been lucky and honored to work with some amazing experts in the field, a way more accomplished, intelligent professional than I ever could dream to be, and they sit in those rooms with me and they help me with this work. So that is something that, I don't know if I'll ever be able to repay some of those leaders for their support, but when I get a chief to say, hey, what can I do on this? Or, hey, how can I help the team out on this? And everybody's starting to pick up work. The speed and the process and the laser focus on this project, I think, is at a level that I haven't seen it before since joining the team. And so I'm excited to bring you this update today. Oh, that was the dramatic February 2023. Sorry.
Thank you, Dr. Malloy.
Board members, first of all, thank you to Dr. Malloy. He has been championing this work. He represents a number of people gathered here in the audience today, but also countless people behind the scenes in student enrollment, other places, budget, finance, transportation. This is a system-wide issue. It's not as simple as saying this is just how we assign children. I will tell you that in the conversations we've talked about the operational efficiencies to be realized here that would drive additional dollars back into our classrooms. Just on Friday alone, while out at one of our bus transportation yards, that does not have a place for a meeting, but under your direction will have one very soon. You're building a beautiful addition to the bus compound out in Buckingham, but a great opportunity to just sit down with that staff. I learned a whole nother aspect of what's impacting us with what we're doing. We are using up warranty time on our school buses at an unheard of rate. The average bus drives in the state of Florida about 500 to 600 miles a month. Ours are driving between 1,000 and 2,000 a month. And they're only warranted till 100,000 miles. So while we still have warranty years left, we are eating up warranties by the amount of miles our buses are transported. So that drives additional costs for repair. I'm still trying to quantify some of that data on your behalf. Had a quick conversation with the transportation manager there. He was going to get with Roger, have some conversations with Roger Lloyd as well. But we really need to consider overall, it was just a whole nother level of thought that I had not given the problem. The amount of miles we're driving is just like driving your car past its warranty. And yet now we have to fix them at our own expense, whereas in the past, they could be fixed by warranty up to a certain number of years, or at least get some form of adjustment in the repair as well. I think the most important thing here for all of us to hear your discussion today is, and you heard me say at the town hall, I don't have a plan per se. We have a lot of great work that the community did prior to the pandemic that set us up with a place to start. There is a former proximity plan, and I think we've done enough digging to know that it's a great place for us to start. But we have those big questions about transportation, grandfathering, and the amount of choice that we'll transport. Be clear, we will follow the law. The state of Florida says we have an open enrollment policy, and if you want to go from Bonita Springs to Ida Baker, you can. I just don't think we have a responsibility to transport that level of transportation, and even in our current plan, we don't. Right? We don't transport that far away. But student enrollment has had to get creative with the number of students that I remind the public about. 6,000 new students from June until the start of school. Not families, students. So student enrollment has got to get creative about where those students are placed so as to not overcrowd any one particular building, but to spread that wealth of opportunity, which is those young people coming to our community, providing an opportunity to go multiple different places. So I think Dr. Malloy has set the stage for your discussion very well. For those of you, and all of you have come to community engagement meetings and have come to the town halls, I appreciate your attendance to hear what the community is saying. And Adam strikes a very important chord. They all are about some type of change until you get down to the personal level. And then, as long as it doesn't affect their child. But I think that's at least the starting point. We know where they're at. Now we can engage in the community dialogues with some additional work where they'll be doing most of the talking and we'll be doing most of the listening and gathering their approach to some of these very large issues. Who should be grandfathered? What level of transportation should we provide? In which zones are preferred zones? And how do we potentially move back to more of a neighborhood school? I'd ask Adam if he can to drive back to the Post-it note. This is what we're thinking about, and I'm talking, they're not going to be big yellow ones, they're going to be big white ones. We're going to list out what we currently do, and we're going to list out a fully zoned school district on the far right-hand side. I don't think we're going to get all the way over there. But I've had people ask me very pointed questions. How do we get our school system into the top 10 efficiencies of the other school districts? All the other school districts that are in the top 10 follow the open enrollment law, but they don't transport choice, and kids are very specifically assigned. I don't think that's agreeable right now in our community from the town halls. So we have to land somewhere between the Post-it note on the left and the Post-it note on the right. So I look forward to your conversations and feedback and helping us to inform how we go about moving forward in our communities and in our dialogues with stakeholders.
Okay, board members, Ms. Gittens, and then Ms. Morgan.
Okay, good afternoon, everyone.
Good afternoon.
A couple of questions, they should be quick. One on the surveys, and if you said this before I came in, let me know. But on the surveys, I think it was like slide 6 or whatever, and 7, and it talked about that there were 35. Was this something that was done at the forums and people chose to do it there or later, or can you explain how that came about?
Yes, ma'am. So the surveys, that snapshot was not done after the 3 surveys. That snapshot was done after the West Zone 1 and put into the presentation. We also have not released those surveys to the general public, which we were waiting on the conclusion of the town halls. We wanted that to be a town hall kind of incentive to participate in those, but those will be released to the general public and sent via our communication channels, I imagine, if not this week, then next week.
Okay, and I appreciate that, and I always go back to, you can prove whatever you want to with data. So the question that jumps in my mind always is, this is 35, these are people that are used to speaking, want to speak, understand the situation, have the time to be there, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So I just say, and I thank you for the data, and it's very good, and it's a beginning. However, we have to be very extremely careful not to put something out without the caveat, this was one location, this was one group, this is one demographic, explain who the demographic is, how many were parents, how many are community, because someone just looking at this from face value can assume many, many things, and I'll stop with that. You mentioned about Southward Village, about the coming events that are coming up, and one was Southward Village on slide 9. On 10-5. It's my understanding that the residents of Southward Village are going to be, if not already started, to be removed from there so the work can begin. Who are we talking to in a town hall about Southward Village? And this comes up, and you all know it's a bone to me with Southward Village, because they are going to be temporarily moving people. And I've asked the mayor this in public several times, how do you know how many of those temporarily moved will return to their home? So if we do a town hall, not that we shouldn't, but just food for thought. I mean, who are we doing it with and for? And you get people excited, and they're not the ones that get to come back.
We are conducting a town hall at Southward Village. We are aware of the move. We're trying to get in prior to that to lend some additional diversity to our voice in this process. Our meeting with them will not be about what the city has planned for them, but more along the lines of understanding, again, what's working for them as a parental group, what can be improved, and what keeps them up at night. I suspect those questions will be answered differently in that community than they may be in some of our others.
And just a suggestion, we don't need to discuss it, but kind of a explanation to the community about Southward Village. Where are the students and the families going during this process? And even something simple and, pictorial to show, these students from this community are going to be attending this school during the time of, the rebuild, et cetera, et cetera. But that could help answer a whole lot of questions too. And then you can tell us later what the collaboratory event is. You can let us know that. And then lastly, on slide 14, when you were talking about growth and, let me get to it real quick, and zones. And I'm just throwing this out to the board. I think that with proximity looming and all that we're doing with proximity, we really need to look at how that affects this board and redistricting. And I know it was a pushback before because of in the middle of campaign season, but on this board, because of every 2 years, there's always going to be someone running for office. And we really need to address the fact of, are we as a board going to look at, if we're rezoning for proximity, are we going to redistrict for the board for representation? And that's all I have, and thank you very much. Great report.
Thank you, Ms. Gittens. Mrs. Morgan?
So I have a question, and one question, one comment. The question is, when you say which zones are preferred, are you talking about the numbers of students? Are you talking about geographic location? Are you talking about economic and racial distributions? Is that's okay? All right.
Morgan, just to that point, because I do think that's a good opportunity to clarify there. So with the work that we've done with GIS technology and creating zones with a certain, diversity as it relates to all these different level of student demographics, we have a number of pathways, options to go. So really, we're just talking about the size of the zone, going from our current subzones, right, which is where we are now, to smaller strategic zones. Remember map 4 that we presented in August of last year? It reduced the average number of choices families had from 12 to 4, right? And then we also have the option of a 1-to-1, and then whether or not we can combine 1-to-1 and smaller choice. But like Dr. Bernier said, we don't have like a plan that we're moving on. We have plans that we're building to be activated.
Okay, and then my comment is this, if you want to know what board members think. I'm all for the smallest possible zones possible, but my concern is that transportation decisions be linked to opportunities for kids. So for example, at the elementary level, you have different programs before and after school, and you have, I'll leave it at that. And then in the middle school, you have some different educational opportunities at school. So I would be happy to do a strict zoning, but I know that we don't have the same opportunities. And so that's my biggest concern. And also school grades. So people look at grades, and then they look at before and after school, they look at extracurricular activities, et cetera. Those are my comments. Thank you.
I think those are vital information for us to copy down. I think it's really important that we reflect that. I think one of the most important things that we have seen through surveys from the past is parents are happy with their home school, but they're not happy with the school district of Lee County. And I find that very interesting data, but that's been repeated nationwide. People love the school that they go to, but the larger system they have issues with. And I think in this particular case, we have to look at a couple of things as we look to those. If you want to think about an aggressive, passionate platform, proximity is one, because it will get us through next year in 23-24. with maybe a system that keeps 2,000 plus children from being late every day and gets our middle schoolers home before 7 o'clock at night. We've got to do a better job with our kids. But one of the long-term projects of working with the Collaboratory Boys and Girls Club, me trying to make sure I get all the stars, the YMCA, and other individuals like that, is I have asked for them to think about a very bold plan from kindergarten through 8th grade, where we have universal care both before and after school. This community has the knowledge, the means, and the economic funding, if it's a priority, to do something like that. And that would help stabilize our families from the aspect of, I know I could drop my children off at a certain hour and pick them up by a certain hour. We're never going to solve the 5 a.m. work call for a parent. All right, but we will be able to help that 5:30 commute home that may get them to school by 5:45. And we'll be able to keep our kids engaged in things during that period of time that prevents them from being out in the community. So proximity is the beginning of a belief of this community making some determinations about operating in the best interest of our children, with giving them avenues with which to help construct what that looks like, and then continuing with the larger vision that I've shared with all of you of some things that we could be doing across this community that would help support our parents, our children, and provide them a connection to their school building that they haven't had necessarily in the past without, in some cases, some exorbitant costs. So looking forward to that dialogue beginning as well.
Yeah, and I just want to say, I think that's brilliant, because by bringing the community in and making them part of that entire infrastructure time-wise, also helps the community educate families about, the process and why we're doing what we're doing. So thank you very much.
Great. Okay, board members. Ms. Patrica.
So I've got a few, so if you want to cut me off and then come back to me for a second round, that's fine.
I'll let you know.
Thank you.
Okay.
Dr. Muller, you are awesome. I have felt like you should be the voice of this all along, because your passion for this work comes through in every word that comes out of your mouth. So thank you for the work you're doing and your willingness to get out there and sort of be in the line of fire, because the fire's coming, I think. What you said, even though you ended a sentence with a preposition, I'm happy with what you said, which is they're happy with the school they're at. And I think therein lies the problem that we are going to have going forward. I've gone to, other than being on the school board, I have been to 2 school board meetings in my life. And that was when the board took tests away from my children. The decision of this board impacted my kids. So I came to school board meetings, and now ultimately I end up on the school board because of what the school board did. And I know how much parents love their elementary school. I'm not a touchy-feely person, but if you had tried to take Pinewoods Elementary School away from me while my kids were there, even when my daughter was in 3rd grade, if you had tried to take it away from my kindergartner, I would have been in this boardroom just begging you to please not do that. And parents love their schools, kids love their schools, and I want to make sure we're prepared for that, because I'm not as optimistic as you are on slide 8. Slide 8 indicates to me that we are going to face difficulty with these grandfathering decisions. The other thing about slide 8 that was a little disappointing, or part of what you said that was a little disappointing to me, was I was really happy that staff was there and they were visible, and that's a sign from the administration that they're engaged and they're in this process. But there were so few people in that room that were not staff members, right? Like, we didn't have a ton of engagement from the community. We had a ton of engagement from staff, but the room was not filled with people in the community, which tells me that the decisions we make, we're going to feel them when student assignment hits, because that's when most parents are going to become aware that the changes have been made. Does that make sense?
It does.
Mm-hmm. Do you want to, I can tell you want to jump in.
I just would like to, right now, they were better attended than our board meetings are. They were better attended than the crowd here at the workshop today, in the briefing today. But it's a start. In a town hall meeting is not the end of engagement, it's the beginning of it. It's getting the word out. It's using those people who signed in to use those email accounts of the people we did receive that are outside of staff, inviting them back to the community engagements and saying, please bring somebody with you. It's not, please come, but it's not enough just to come alone. Please take the added responsibility of taking somebody else off their dinner table or away from the parent pickup loop in one afternoon to come and engage with us and to really continue to build this emphasis. The other piece, when you think about grandfathering, to take your earlier question, is one of the things we must also consider. So these are, again, this is Chris Bernier with ideas, not a plan. One of the things that we may have to do in order to figure out where on those Post-it notes we land is we may have to talk about something called a sibling preference. So if I already have a student enrolled at school X and I have a kindergartner arriving and that student is still going to be in 4th grade, then the kindergartner gets a sibling preference to that school. That keeps the family unit together, but every decision we make like that, the community needs to be aware that's 1 additional year, or in the case of that kindergartner, 5 additional years before we can pull this current choice transportation system apart. If that's the will of the community and that's how they want to approach it, and they go into it fully informed that 23, 24 will not be good, but 27, 28 will be, and that's what the community wants, and that's what the board will have to decide along with the community. We'll bring the recommendation forward, but it will be the community and the community input and the board's information in their process which determines where we land. So yeah, I think for you in your particular case where you gave me the situation of your 3rd grader and a kindergartner, and then there were some more coming, as long as there was a child enrolled at that school, there could be a sibling preference. But I just caution us that everything we do like that extrapolates the plan of getting to a more efficient transportation system. But those are deals that may have to be made. So that's why we want to go out and engage with the community in those processes and those ideas.
Okay. Ms. Patrica, continue.
Okay, cool. So, question, how are we going to ensure at a minimum that the level of diversity that we have now, if not greater diversity, is present in our schools? And when I'm talking about diversity, I'm not talking just race, ethnicity, and culture. I'm talking about student performance data being well spread across our schools. I understand that our schools are probably more segregated than they've been since we started this thing, but like I said, at a minimum, maintain the diversity we have, if not make it better. Is that on our radar?
It is definitely on our radar. I think diversity has to be a part of the conversation. Any type of solution to that in this dialogue would be premature. But it is clear from talking to you all individually that at least the maintenance of our current diversity, as you describe it, not just race and ethnicity, male, female, but also test scores, is something that you want us to consider moving forward. I do appreciate the candid viewpoint from a board member to say that we haven't reached all of the goals that this plan was supposed to put into motion for us. We do have some schools that have predominantly ELL populations, for instance. We do have, areas where they are getting more level 1s and level 2s than others. I do know a system that can effectively manage all of those percentages, but it is a more limited choice program and much more close to the right-hand side of being a most restrictive environment, that every time a school building is built, you look at where those kids will come from, you zone it, and you look at the impact to all the other schools surrounding it as you draw off their student population. Some advantages to that are, now I know where to cite a school. I don't cite a school and then hope that the enrollment comes, right? Or that it's pushed based upon a choice program where somebody's getting their 6th, 7th, 8th, or 17th choice. If the community is willing to engage that far to the right, we'll keep engaging them in that process. But I don't suspect that will be our first landing point on the Post-it notes between left and right.
Okay, and what are we doing, if anything, to make underutilized schools more attractive? So the last data that came in front of the board was that San Carlos Park Elementary was at 75% capacity. Putting more students at San Carlos Park would take the pressure off of Pine Woods and Three Oaks Elementary. So what are we doing to make that a more attractive option to families?
I can certainly get back with you regarding all of the efforts that Academic Services is putting under making sure that we can create equity amongst our schools and parents have the ability to make informed choice related to programming that I believe should exist in every school building, taking the particular names off the list, but every high school needs to have a flourishing fine arts program. They need to be able to have band and chorus and art, and you don't have to be a fine arts academy or a magnet to have that. You need good quality teaching and the dollars necessary in your DAR, your direct allocation from the school district, to pull those things off. This was more of a conversation specifically about proximity and assigning students to school, and I understand the connection to parents want quality environments, but I don't have enough of that data present in front of me to give you the depth of response that I think you and the community would want. I'll have to get back to you.
All right, and then I have just one more question, and then I'm done.
Okay.
Well, it's a bunch of questions, but it's all one thing. In terms of grandfathering, found efficiencies will help me to decide. So what I mean by that is, if we grandfather for 1 year, how much do we save? If we grandfather for 2, for 5, for 10, how much do we save? And is there any way to determine how many families will be impacted at 1, 2, 5, 10 years, whatever years you decide to put out to us? And also, how many of our current students in elementary school have siblings that will be entering the system after this starts? So that will help me to understand how many families will be impacted by this. Those are my comments and questions. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Ms. Patrica. Anybody else? Ms. Giovanelli?
Thank you. Great job. I think this is a start, and I think that's the community engagement piece is the huge piece of that. I recognize that the 35 people that participated in your survey is just a sampling of it, and I would be curious to see more information and on that. So I look forward to that future information. But I think at the end of the day, we have to think what's best for children, and right now what we're doing isn't. Even because with the fact of the transportation piece of it alone, because some children are traveling across Lee County actually, and they get to the other side, an hour and a half later, and past 8 elementary schools. So, I mean, that alone, I mean, I've heard that from the principals, and it's the children are done by the time they get there. They're just, they need to run around the bus a few times. I mean, they're just that hyped up from it all. So to try to calm them back down to get them in the mindset of learning is what's hurting, I believe, hurting our children. So I think that this discussion needs to continue. I love the fact that you're having the town halls and that Dr. Bernier is leading those. I think that we're in the right, we're on the right seats of the bus at this point and heading in the right direction. And I look forward to the outcome at the end of all of this. I have several friends that have come up to me and spoke to me about in their elementary school year, they went to 3 different elementary schools because that's how the zones changed for them. And they didn't move. Their home stayed the same, but a new school was built, so they went to that. They didn't have a choice. They were told that's what you did. And nobody said anything. They did it. And she turned out okay, and several others. And so I think that we sometimes focus on things that are negative instead of focus on the things that are positive and why we're doing what we're doing. And I see a lot of positives versus negatives. And I think this is a conversation that's been long coming and long overdue. So thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Gittens?
Okay, thank you for letting me have another go at this. A couple of things that were said, we talk about where and when we have the meetings in the town halls. And I was sharing this with the superintendent the other day that when I was in charge of the SAC committee, School Advisory Council at East Lee, and we were a busing school. The majority of the students were from somewhere else, bused out there. And then you're asking these parents from way across town to come to a SAC meeting. So I had suggested we go to them, and even deeper, to go to churches. Why can't you do a partnership with some of the churches? They have Bible studies or choir practice or something during the week, and to do a partnership that either before choir practice or right afterwards or whatever, that someone, will come in and sit and talk with them. We've got to go where the people are, or we will continue getting the people we got. And I was glad that Ms. Patrica brought up the fact, too, about the diversity piece. But it also brought to mind, I think of District 5 and like Lehigh and those areas. And yes, we have some schools that have a plethora of the same level of students. But that's the community. That's who lives there. And when you talk about proximity in neighborhood schools, that's who lives there. So it's almost like going back to the city planners and the county and saying, because our job is kind of after the fact. They make the decisions, we're going to put a neighborhood here, we're going to build houses here, we give the permits for this, and then we have to educate those kids where they are. So to me, it takes it a step back, that there needs to be a tighter partnership to discuss, if you're going to put a neighborhood here, how's that going to affect schools? We've got 3 right here, and you want to put, 1,000 houses over here. On Homestead and Milwaukee, there's going to be, 1,000 houses going in there. And we have a couple of schools in the area, but if you build a house there on Homestead in Milwaukee, and you hear this brand-new elementary school, Amana Sayre, and a brand-new middle school, you're going to want to go there. You're going to pass by Mirror Lakes. You're going to pass up Veterans Park. You're going to pass up Lambs. Because, we've heard that this is the best school. So we have to find some way, I guess as a total community, to sit down, and when we're looking at planning, maybe having someone from the school board on some of the planning committees or something, to make sure that we're in sync with that. Anyway, just a thought. Thank you.
Any other questions or comments? Ms. Jordan?
Yes, I would just like to say thank you very much for this presentation, Dr. Malloy. And I have attended each and every one of the town halls and listened to what the residents had said, and actually our teachers and community, because they are also community members. Even though they're teachers, they still have children, and they still are part of the community. And I know for a fact that one person attended the San Carlos one, went back home and found many friends to attend the other one. So by them coming to these meetings, they do have the opportunity to hear what is being said, and then to go out and encourage other people to participate and come to the meetings, even though they may have the same thing in their mind, but they're still there to listen and to share that information, which of course then they go back out and they share that information as well. And I will have to say, and I know it's been driving me, it has always driven me crazy, the zones for the longest time is this invisible lines that separate us. And as far as like my children, we were in the south zone, so my kids could go from downtown all the way out to San Carlos, Estero, and that has taken place. But I will tell you, my daughter, every time she hears about this proximity, she's like, "You're voting against me," because my grandson lives in Estero, but goes to school at Edison Park, and even though he sleeps on the bus there, the kid loves his school, as we keep saying, how much they love this school. And he's willing to sleep on the way there just so that when he goes there, he has a great experience. But then again, when my other granddaughter was, and I'm going back to my history, when she did not get either one that was close enough for us to walk to, Edison nor Allen Park, and we started really searching for schools, we went in and looked at websites, we went in and we met the people, and the whole atmosphere and the way that she felt when she walked into Villas, and that's where she had gone to for some years, it made her feel that way. But I think that we do get this misconception of, oh my goodness. And I know that she even felt the first day she came out, she's like, are we Spanish? Because the majority of the kids were Spanish. I said, well, no, you're not, but you can learn it. And so that culture of the school and the makeup just really embraced her and embraced all the families. So I think that we have to remember that all of our schools are good and we can make them better. And with participation of community and families, that's what builds our schools. But I do appreciate the fact how they were saying we have to make sure that we do have the offerings in our schools, that so regardless of what school you're in, we will, can assure that our children will have those courses and, the needs and wants, the arts that they want and love, because that always builds character for the kids. And then just, being part of the community. I really think this is a really good thing, but I think we all have to get together on this, bring the community in, and all of us work together in doing this. And I'm sure all of us are here to help do whatever we need to do, but thank you.
I did just want to share with Ms. Patrica the numbers on the non-district staff that were present. We had 153 non-district staff at the 3 total events. That does not include the large number of teachers that did come to each one. I would say that at each one of the individual town halls, we had more than the 3 proximity engagement meetings that we had cumulative, so total. I would say that we maybe had the 30 total in 3 meetings. In 2021 when we went out with the boundaries with the new map 4. So I do think that the engagement was leveled up for sure. And I think that it's like Dr. Bernier said, it's only the beginning, and we will continue to reach out because this is it's just a new approach really for all of us to be out there and to do this together with them. So 153, while we may say, and I know that there was a lady at San Carlos that was very upset that she had changed her flight, but she got an intimate engagement with the superintendent to address her specific issue. And if she had something for a subject area, she could be turned to a district administrator who was there to solve her problem. And that's what those were for. And I did want to say, like, well, you have this opportunity right here. I get the flight, I saw her bags, I saw her suitcases, and while she was upset with the numbers, she got whatever issue she had resolved immediately. And I think that that's really important. That's why we're going out there. And it is challenging from a time standpoint, but 153 total on the non-district, you probably add 20 teachers per one. And so you're looking close to, 200 at those town halls.
Okay, Ms. Patrica?
And I don't want you to take that as a criticism. It's not your fault that more people didn't show up, but 150 parents to impact how many elementary and middle school kids do we have? That's my concern. My concern is that this is going to impact our entire community, and they're not going to know it until they register for school. And I don't know what we can do about that. I mean, everyone I saw in the grocery store and at Costco, I said, are you coming? Are you coming? Are you coming? No, I can't. My son has soccer. No, I can't. And these are the people who are going to be impacted. So that's my concern. When I'm at a board meeting and a handful of people come and demand something, I have to remember that I represent 800,000 people, not the 5 that come to board meetings. And in the same regard, I think we need to keep that in mind as we move forward. Please don't take it as a criticism. That's not how it was intended.
No, I know. I wanted to give the exact numbers because we had talked at San Carlos.
I appreciate that. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other comments? Okay, I just have a few. I want to thank you, Adam, and Dr. Bernier and staff for the work that you've done. And over the years, whenever we've had town halls and meetings at schools, we have historically not had the turnout that we want, but the people who can come. We can go to the soccer fields, the baseball fields, the volleyball courts. I mean, and that's where, You can find tons of parents. Are we going to get their attention? I don't know. I think kids love their schools. Most kids love the schools they're in. And so I can remember when I was at a new school, and Adam knows which one I'm talking about, we had people who were assigned there, and they were not happy. Well, after a couple of weeks, they were told that they were able to go to the school they had originally chosen. But by then, they loved their school, so they didn't want to. So I think that's part of the picture, is that kids will be happy in most of our schools. Our schools offer a safe place. They feed kids, and they give them a social connection. And they teach them. So I think that we have many offerings at many of our schools, and that most kids will love their schools. We have many parents who already transport their kids to where they want them to go. I know someone who lives in Sanibel and transports their kids to North Fort Myers Academy. Okay, they are able to do that, they want to do that, and it's worth it to them. And there are parents who have the ability and the wherewithal to do that, so I think that's going to be another variable. Another thing is that right now, we are growing exponentially, and so when you talk about existing schools and school sites, that's another big variable and consideration. So I think that the communication, connecting with the community happens with the town halls, certainly, but then I think it also happens with our local media, our TV channels, social media, and at the risk of making a mistake saying this, I'm going to say word of mouth, because I think some people, a lot of parents, especially at the sports fields, and I've seen it, do talk to one another about school. So I think that as we progress with this project, that the word will get out. I know that there is a lot to consider. I support what you're doing. This is a whole new look at student enrollment. And so I think I see Miss Ralph back there. Hi. And God bless you, that's all I can say, because you've been amazing through all this. But this is a big job, and we're in it together, and thank you, really, thank you.
So, Madam Chair, just a quick viewpoint in looking at the board members. We're hearing that specifically grandfathering, what level of transportation, what zones are preferred, those are areas that you're comfortable with us beginning the dialogue with the community and reporting back to you. We want to add the additional piece about grandfathering. We want to make sure that diversity is part of the conversation. What I didn't hear, and I've heard in the past and from board member one-on-ones, as we look to the transportation issue, and maybe we can deal with that as we get a little deeper into it, would there be a feeling amongst the board that you could provide me just some direction by nods or something like that regarding transportation being provided based upon a needs basis, especially if we limited the amount of choice? Would there be a particular factor where you would like us as a committee and moving forward and engaging with our community to look at transportation potentially, that while some parents would not have it to a particular school, others who demonstrate the inability of economic means, would you like us to open that conversation with the community as well?
Yes. Yes. Ms. Gittens?
May I just say that anytime we talk about transportation and need versus choice, that's the conversation. Yeah, need versus choice, because if you choose, because of whatever reason, that you want your child to go to that school, then it's kind of it has to fall back. Some responsibility has to be shared. So, need versus choice.
Ms. Patrica? Thank you, Ms. Gittens.
I would hate the thought of a parent living on Sanibel being denied the opportunity to send her child to North Academy because she can't afford to do it. You talked about someone who has the wherewithal and the means to do it. that's the kind of, and not necessarily that school, but like, if there's a full-time gifted elementary, I understand that there's some argument about whether part-time is sufficient. If we can scale up and have, you know, full-time gifted at every elementary school to serve every family, great. But if a parent wants their kid to be in full-time gifted, but they don't have the means to get the child there, I don't think that family should be denied. That's one thing. The other thing is, how quickly can we look at means testing for high schools? We don't need to take choice away, but we can have parents pay if they decide to send their children to a school that's not located closest to their home, and the parent can afford to do that. Make sense? Totally off the subject, but kind of.
No, very
Kind of
interrelated
related.
to what we're thinking about. It helps enrich the discussion with Dr. Malloy and team following the board workshop, so appreciate that.
Okay. And Ms. Jordan?
Personally, how do we decide who has the needs or who does not? I mean, we're going to do an all-call, okay, who needs to have transportation? Raise your hand. Who doesn't need that? And I get that when if we have the zones are smaller, then I think that's more doable, but for us to just say, and then Sanibel to North Fort Myers, that's completely out of the zone, so them driving someone all the way there, that is kind of on the onus of the parents, but my goodness, that, I don't know how we decide who has the needs and who does not have the need.
I don't think anybody right now has any answers to those questions, just like grandfathering and sibling preference. It's important, though, that we exhaust some of those. They brought it up for this specific reason. It's important that we exhaust those opportunities in the community engagement process so that something like that doesn't surface at the 11th hour just prior to a recommendation as early as maybe this January, February. You'd want to be sure that the issues that potentially could be on the table have at least been explored and there's been some conclusion drawn around them. So we'll keep continuing to sweat the details.
Okay. Then any other comments or information, Dr. Malloy? Or are you?
No, just thank you for your feedback. And, you know, I just wanted to briefly remark the challenges of addressing a system of this size. With the leadership team that we have, we're not going to be discouraged from having those critical conversations, right? That's not just a word that we're throwing out there that are challenging. I think more importantly is the critical conversations that we are having about our own internal system to try to do something better. Because there are issues on the horizon that we're looking to deal with in conjunction with the community as it relates to this system, but we're currently sitting responsible for a large number of issues as well. So I think that those are two big considerations that you guys were kind of talking about, which I think are very, very important. But our team, and like I gave credit to them before, they're not going to be swayed from having those crucial conversations about doing what's best for kids in our schools. And I know that you guys aren't, either. I hope that wasn't a preposition to nonsense.
Thank you, Dr. Malloy. Ms. Gittens?
I just have to say this last little piece because, in listening and talking about who decides where the child is going and all, the crux of this matter as well are the parents that don't even know the question to ask. So, it's not denying this one or denying that one. It's denying the child whose parent does not understand, I need to ask this question so that my child can get on this bus to go to this school. To me, that's the main thing.
Thank you. Any others? Okay. Dr. Bernier, anything else?
No, ma'am.
Okay.
No, ma'am.
Then I guess we can move right along. And at this point, thank you, Dr. Malloy, thank you, Dr. Bernier, and thank you, board. We're at public comment.
Thank you, Madam Chair. There are no individuals signed up for public comment.
Okay, and is there anyone in the audience who would like to make a comment? Okay, seeing none, then we'll move on to board member comments. And we'll begin. Mrs. Morgan, are you ready? Yeah. Okay, with Mrs. Morgan.
But I actually have a good of the order.
Oh, okay.
And I don't know whether I've brought this up before, and forgive me if I've forgotten, but we had a conversation about the board attorney evaluation document,
Yes.
about it being revised. We have done nothing about it, to my knowledge. We have an evaluation coming up. What instrument will we be using, and will it be acceptable to the board attorney, since we have taken the position that we felt that the interim or the regular evaluation didn't meet our needs? So that's one question, one comment. And the other comment I'm going to make is this, and I've already talked to the board attorney about it. I think given the sort of litigious environment we had from 18 until now, and given that we're seating a new board, I would love to see some numbers that talk about the number of complaints, investigations filed against board members, against the board, against Fresh Air Solutions since 18, what the outcomes have been, whether they've been local, state, or federal, and how much it has cost the district to resolve most of the, or to go through the exercise for most of these, because I believe that most of them have had no finding whatsoever, and yet have consumed enormous amounts of staff time. So I would like to be able to say to the public, we've investigated these, the door is closed. This is what it costs us when we have these kinds of complaints filed. So those are that's my good of the order. Now,
Thank you.
my update. I want to say to staff that I am loving these weekly updates, just loving them. And so I'm not going to be able to comment on what everybody's submitted, but I like to just pick out a few because I think I'm learning a lot, and it shows also how we are working much more effectively, I think, with the community as a whole. The collaboration between the tech colleges, the Public Service Academy, led the industry engagement and funding, led them to get the Industry Engagement and Funding Award of $150,000 from the Lee County Industrial Development Authority. I don't recall us being able to do that before. To be used towards scholarships, student emergency funding, and targeted recruitment efforts at those three schools. I loved that students from Lehigh Senior were invited to tour the Fort Myers Technical College. I think all of our students, high school students, ought at some point be able to, and probably not their senior year, have an opportunity to see what career opportunities there are for them, not just academic, post high school. I loved the students assisting at the Shell Factory, community engagement. Cape Tech hosted a Florida Department of Transportation evening community workshop to seek public input on the Pine Island Corridor vision and future development. I think that's awesome. I mean, we're doing great work with the communities. These are things that we'd never engaged in before. I want to thank the ESOL director, Dr. Rivera, because she mentioned that she met with principals, but not only did she mention she met with principals, but she talked about what it was that they discussed, how they were discussing academic needs and supports, how they used data by grade level, language, number of newcomers, all kinds of criteria to help schools understand exactly what their specific problem is, and then explore opportunities to address their specific problem. I liked that Dr. Negron observed classrooms, and they're doing, iReady Flyleaf phonics instruction. This is something new. They're going to get professional development in it. I mean, we're just continually expanding the resources that we're offering. And for anybody who's watching from the public, I loved this data. English language learners, 16,700 in the school district of Lee County. So that's almost 17% of our students. Spanish, 13,006, Haitian Creole, 1,000, Portuguese, 522. I don't know if I'm saying this right, Quiche, which is one of the Mayan dialects, I believe, is 145, and Canjabal, I believe, is another Mayan dialect, 132. I mean, we don't have translation services for at least the last two categories, as far as I know. And we may have one or two students in every school, and we're struggling to figure out not only how to teach them, but how to communicate with them. So I just think that's something the public ought to be aware of. I want to thank, I think it was Academic Services for providing an update on textbooks. That was really helpful. I mean, we keep hearing about the fact that we're Xeroxing, listen to me, making copies of text materials, really, okay. I didn't, really. And lastly, I just want to say, and it's been said, but it needs to be said again, district leadership, maintenance services, support divisions, who all work together to deal with that Cape boil water event. I mean, can you imagine at 5 o'clock in the morning, we have staff at a distributor picking up 75,000 bottles of water, putting them on trucks and trailers, and then having our maintenance staff deliver to all of the schools impacted. I just think that's extraordinary, and kudos to staff. When Dr. Bernier asked me if I thought we should close, if in retrospect, should we have closed the Cape schools, my response was absolutely not, because I really believe that the team in this school district is strong enough to respond to that kind of emergency and just turn it around and make it work for kids and staff. So compliments to everybody, and those are my comments. Thank you.
Thank you, Mrs. Morgan. Ms. Gittens.
I wasn't ready yet.
Would you like
All
me
that.
Well, there was so much packed in that
dear.
that I have to unpack some of it. So can you go before? Can someone go ahead and then you come
Ms.
back?
Jordan, are you ready?
Sure.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, well, thank you for that, Ms. Morgan. That was
A lot.
That was a lot, but that was good. That was a lot. I really appreciate that. And I just want to answer, I don't know, a couple of those things, if I may, through the chair. With the complaints, I know that we had had that happened, gosh, it's probably been maybe a year ago, where we were speaking about how many complaints we had, the number of complaints, and then the findings of that. I was trying to go back to look at when that took place, but I know that that did come to be, and the financing. Maybe Mr. Pre-Bruno can help me with that, but I think that I remember that sharing that information a while ago, but it's been some time ago when we did share that information. And then also with the evaluation, I know there were quite a few things on that was not for us. I know I personally had an issue with trying to understand what some of those meant in order to do the scoring. I know Mr. Bruno had mentioned those as well, and Miss Cindy was here at that time, and I know we were going to go over those numbers. I think it was 2.1 and 2, if I recall the exact numbers of the ones that we were going to try to correct and fix. So yes, that is definitely something that we have to do. So I rewrote that down. So thank you for that, bringing that up. And then it's been a busy couple weeks. I was at the North Fort Myers Civic Association, where they had adopted 7 of our new teachers from over in the North Fort Myers area, and they brought them up, and they wrote them a check for them to use for whatever they needed to use for their classrooms to help them out. It was really nice to see them. They were excited. Brand new teachers, excited to be here moving forward. They also had invited 50 of the kids throughout the North Fort Myers area as well, and gave them a gift card for shoes, a $50 gift card for them to go in and purchase shoes. So the parents were there with the kids to accept that and to go, and they're absolutely to be spent for shoes. So there was a way for them to do that with the card. Also, I really do appreciate these town halls because to me, going out there and listening to what people have to say really is opening up my eyes too, and being out in the community. And thank you, Dr. Bernier, for putting those messages out for everything that has taken place in the last couple of weeks with our children. Because as I'm out there in the community and I'm talking to people, they are telling me that they really appreciate the fact that they received a notification from you, the videos, they're hearing what you're saying, and they are sitting their children down, they're having these conversations with them. Not that they have not been having the conversations with them, but that's just a reminder of them to have a deeper dive conversation and the importance of taking responsibility for your actions, your words. So they shared with me how much they appreciate it. So I'm letting you know that that has been a very positive messaging. And then also, we had back probably a week and a half ago, we had gone to FGCU, and we were at this presidential reception from students of student teachers from Africa, which is really a great, it's great as well because they're coming into our schools and we're lucky to have them, and what they're bringing to their culture and sharing with our students a different of way, and when you hear their stories, it's just so impressive. So I'm really glad that they will be part of the solution, or outcomes, which we keep on speaking about. But that's just about all I have to say. It's just the fact that, being out there and hearing, it is more, you're hearing a lot of the positive things that are going on in the district. Sure, can we do better? Always, that's our goal, but I have to say, Dr. Bernier, everybody's talking about you, our friends over here, Mr., what's your name? Ramirez. They're impressed on the team that you are building and looking forward to the upcoming years. So thank you. And Miss Jennifer too. And all of you out there, all of you. Not taking from anybody, but thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Jordan. Ms. Gittens, you're ready now?
I'm ready.
Okay.
It's not going to be long and drawn out, don't worry. No, I just wanted to say thank you for the town halls. And I, of course, did it live on Facebook. But it was a good thing because there were questions that came in. There were also people that could not attend, and they were very glad that they could see and hear the things that were being said. So that was a positive. I think, of course, what I said before about how do we get other people out, different parts of the community, and where do we go to do that. In looking at the updates, one of the things that jumped out to me was the update on the instructional vacancies. And again, we've got 98 in the east, 55 in the south, and 29 in the west. And I can recall bringing up several months ago to check into having retired teachers or whomever just doing a part-time, coming in once a month or something on a regular basis. And I was told that it was already in progress, but I stated that what I was talking about was more of a program to push it, to let people know they could, because I don't think a lot of people understand that they can do just, a half a day or something if they can't do a full day. And I did bring it up in a meeting several months ago, and I don't know where that went. I think that could help us a lot. I know there are programs out there, and someone approached us about a program of getting retired subs and all of that, retired teachers. But I just think, like I said, this was back beginning of the year or sometime that I brought this up, or a couple months ago. And I had spoken to some retired teachers that said they would be more than willing to do a half a day or, be on call if a teacher was leaving to go to a doctor's appointment or something like that. And I know that I was told that it can happen, but we need to do it as a progressive type, letting the community know this is a program. I mean, maybe we have to give it a name or whatever. The people want to, and people have asked me since, well, whatever happened with that? So if we could possibly look into that again, I would appreciate it, and give you some of the names of the people that have said to me they would like to do that. So, let's see, I think that's it for now. I'll bring up the rest of the stuff this evening. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Gittens. Ms. Patrica?
Yeah, so I had an opportunity to get to know, I'm often limited in what I can say about staff and schools by the schools my kids go to, because that's where I spend the most time. But I had the opportunity to get to see the football coaching staff at Cape Coral High School in action. And Coach Larry Gary, I think is his name. Is that right? Yep. He's been educating and coaching for 40-ish years, and he is just unbelievable. The team of coaches he has put together around him is unbelievable. So he had one assistant coach who just screamed his head off the whole game. He had another one that was calmly talking to every kid as they walked off the field. He had another one that celebrated every single good play. And then he had another one who found the tiniest thing wrong in every play that occurred. And then he had another one who just walked up and down the sidelines talking to himself under his breath the whole game. And the beauty of putting together a team like that is not just do those kids have incredible mentors and role models, but those kids have a coach that can interact with them. So I was the kind of player, when my coach got up in my face and screamed at me, that's it, I was never going to make that mistake again, because he was holding me accountable and I was never going to be yelled at again. Other kids, if coach gets up in your face and screams, they crumble and they can't function. So he's got every coach on that team to deal with every kid, and I just was so impressed. And at the end of the game, he told me that he's making men first, football players second. And that's really what coaching is all about. And I just felt like he deserves some recognition, because I know he's really doing a fantastic job out there. I had EDAC last night, which is Executive District Advisory Council, not to be confused with Equity and Diversity Advisory Committee. We are losing Dr. Spiro. I'm sad to see you go. I feel like we've got a well-oiled machine going on there, and your staff has always really done an amazing job of allowing that council to function at a very high level. I'm very excited to have Dr. Cupid McCoy join us and continue with that high-level work and whip us into shape where we need to be whipped into shape. I'd like to ask Dr. Bernier, through the chair, if I may, is there an ETA, and you don't have to answer this now, but is it on your radar to have a shade session regarding lessons learned and changes implemented after Friday's?
It'll be part of my comments that both this afternoon and this evening.
Perfect, thank you. And then I also want to comment on your messages, both the email message that was sent out and the video message that you put out. The feedback I've received is that they were solid and serious and authoritative, not authoritarian, authoritative, but they didn't go too far. And I wonder whether, this is something we talked about in EDAC last night, I wonder whether we've put some thought into providing parents with talking points on how to discuss these items with their children in an age-appropriate way. We sit around the dinner table at night, and I will say, if you're in your ACE environmental science class and there's a shooter in the cafeteria, where do you go, what do you do? But my youngest is 15, so it's appropriate for me to have that conversation. I would not have that conversation with my kindergartner. So just wondering if we've put some brain matter to that. And finally, I will save my elected versus appointed fact of the day for tonight. Those are my comments. Thank you.
Thank you. Mrs. Giovanelli.
Thank you. I don't have a lot either. I just wanted to remind everybody that it's Constitution Week, and I would love for Dr. Bernier to, and you can do it later this evening tonight, just what is going on in the schools that they're, discussing, or I know there was a plan in place, and if you could elaborate or share some of that later this evening, or even this now, it's up to you. I just don't want to, I'm just kind of throwing it out there at the last minute. I know that Joseph Coalfield has been diligently, he's a fundraiser, and he actually, his title is the, what is his title? He is the founder of a constitution, I'm not even sure, an organization that he raises money to give that out to students all over the United States, actually, I believe. But he has shared with us in the past. One year it was like 7,000 U.S. Constitution booklets that he's given to Lee County, and he did it again this year. I know through Dr. Carlin. I don't know what the number is. I was curious. I know last year was like 7,000 copies. So I think it's a great thing that we're doing in our schools, and I want the community to know that we are actively celebrating our Constitution. And that's really all I have, and I look forward to the meeting this evening. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. And I'll be brief also and try not to be redundant, but today is Voters Registration Day. So for the listening audience, if you have not yet registered to vote, there may be some important issues in November that you would want to be registered and have your voice heard. Thanks to Dr. Savage for a wonderful continuous systemic improvement board meeting this past week. We had elections of officers. We had the meeting on Zoom, and it was very well attended. And Dr. Kathy Bruno, Attorney Bruno, gave a parliamentary procedures training, and we discussed that we would talk about strategic plan topics, board priorities, and a review of last year's recommendations at the next meeting in October. So thank you for that. Our Healthy Living collaboration is alive and well, and I had an opportunity yesterday to visit Royal Palm School, and they're going to be having a school garden also, and they're looking forward to that as an intervention for some of the students that they have with some severe behavior disorders. That research shows that can be very beneficial to people with needs. I want to thank the Cape Elementary SAC and PTO for inviting me to attend their meeting last week. It was very informative, and we talked a little bit about an elected versus an appointed superintendent. I just gave them facts. And so, thanks to Dr. Bernier and staff again for the town halls and for the responses to the recent safety challenges in our schools. I went last night to FSW where they had college night. That was very well attended. There were over 80 schools. In addition, to our tech colleges, our own tech colleges, as viable opportunities for post-secondary, and our armed forces. In the updates, I noticed that 60 of our students were recognized nationally by College Board, and so that's good. And I also want to say thanks to students, staff, and families for their use of the Connect with Lee virtual school support. So, and just thank you for all you do. And again, Ms. Ralph, thank you for your amazing job. And that's all I have. So, Attorney Bruno.
I have none, thank you.
Okay, and finally, Dr.
I always
Blair.
feel like I'm at the end and I should say I have nothing, but I do. First and foremost, let me clear up whatever rumor may have just started. Jeff Spiro is leaving a committee. He's not leaving, as far as I know, he's not leaving the district, so we're good to hear. No, I just wanted to make sure. I knew what you were saying, but I could also see how it could be interpreted.
There was a hush in the audience.
Oh,
Me too.
my heart almost stopped.
I too would like to recognize the college fair. Not only did we have amazing colleges and universities represented for the first time in 2 years. It's been 2 years since we've been able to hold an event. That is not possible without the help of Suncoast. Suncoast is an amazing sponsor and helps divert a lot of the costs and do an immense amount of work. I know Lori Brooks would be embarrassed by me mentioning her name because it's more of a team event than just Lori, but Lori's sort of the point person who does that work. And we had more than 4,000 families in attendance last night. At one point, I think the clicker at Suncoast broke. So they did amazing work.
Yeah, and I just want to say, along with Lori, were the career specialists and the counselors there to help and support. So thank you to all of those.
Can I jump in on that as well? I was there last night too, and I have to say that my children are now aware that there are colleges outside the state university system. So while I'm happy that Suncoast paid for last night's event, are they going to pay for that tuition?
This was there.
Oh, no, but we are going to, that's a nice segue to a future work session where you're going to hear more about the new Bright Futures requirements and how our school counselors and our other people who work in our schools do a great job of helping support them. To Board Member Morgan's question about evaluation, that is planned for the upcoming workshop on the 28th. So there'll be additional information and a chance to interact regarding Attorney Bruno's evaluation. That is, we just haven't had a chance to schedule that or go over that in a one-on-one. We actually met with retired teachers in an organization that appeared at our town hall the first night and then came back on the second night as well. And they were there, I think, on the third night, or maybe I'm getting the two confused. They were there on the second night at San Carlos and they came back. We met with a small team. They're very interested in connecting our retired teachers to our schools, at least for a half day, sort of a co-teaching situation. We are certainly engaging with them, but we remind all retired people in the area, especially those with a CDL license, former teaching certificate, or something greater than a high school diploma, we could use you as guest teachers, and bus drivers, not necessarily in that order. So again, if anybody's ever interested in a position with the school district or they're retired and they're thinking that they have an inkling and a desire to come back, please put them in touch directly with me as a board member. We will make sure the reach out goes out through the Human Resources Department and our recruitment team, because we are always looking. Since there may be some conversation about this tonight, I wanted to bring up that we have been working for a resolution regarding our systems, specifically our Destiny system, which handles our media materials and library collections, so that parents have an avenue into that system to alert our media specialists or those clerks running the media centers as to their preference regarding certain titles and certain books. That will come up in your update, but depending on our one-on-ones and how they go this week, we may move that to a greater board presentation so we can be clearer to the community prior to the October report cards of how you can utilize your child's account, or his Launchpad account, his or her Launchpad account, to get to the Destiny system in order to provide something like, I don't want them to see anything with wizardry. So a minute a book is checked out, that person sees that note from the parent, and therefore Harry Potter wouldn't be coming home with your child. You could even be more specific with specific titles, etc. So we're excited about that work finally coming to conclusion. I know it's been a lot of work. I'm afraid that I'm leaving something out from the questions that I was asked as we came down the area. We are looking at the request also regarding all the information that was requested regarding complaints and investigations. We believe we can get that done by October. There are a couple of pending ones we'd like to wrap up in order to make sure we have the final financial costs, but certainly appreciate the recommendation. Finally, it'd be remiss not to talk about South Fort Myers High School and Lambs, our two schools that had interesting, but very different experiences regarding school safety in the past week. You're right, last week was about 3,000 cases of water and 75,000 water bottles to keep school open, and I think I intimated in my message to all of you, you would think that would be a pretty good week. Unfortunately, somebody had a greater plan for more stuff on my plate, and we took on with the team 2 very difficult situations. There will be both a private/shaded session and a public accounting of what transpired. We are still taking apart both of those events, trying to get to what worked, what needs to be improved. I think generally the staffs all did what they knew to do in that moment. But I want to be very clear that they're 2 very different situations. One in a middle school has to do with a weapon being on the campus, which makes us consider how our kids enter and exit our school buildings. And those are some of the areas we've already been in shaded session discussing about technology and other ways that we can make our schools even safer than they are. The other is about a swatting activity, which is nationally based. There were schools last week prior to our incident on Friday that were being impacted. A school on the East Coast was impacted at the same time we were, the East Coast of Florida. Same situation, full-blown lockdown, Sheriff's Department arriving to campus because a 911 call is made saying there's a gun on campus, and attached to that is information that's very specific about a shooter, being armed, students already perishing, and because of that nature of that 911 call, as I said to the board, the sheriff doesn't have time to call or confirm, nor do we want him to. We want him to roll at that point and put, his words, troops on the ground at our school buildings, because if we have an active shooter, seconds are of the essence. The phone call came in approximately at 1:04 p.m. The lockdown occurred after a radio call to the SRO from the Sheriff's Department, and the school was locked down by 1:06, 1:07, depending on what you look at. Strategics was utilized to lock down the building, and then there are some things we have to continue to explore about what transpired from there, but I will tell you that the students were placed in classrooms, locked behind doors, and I had the opportunity to be there Monday to talk to some of them about the impact of that. 2 things resonate with me of several. One is that one of the young ladies told me that you have no idea what it's like to sit and wait in the corner of a classroom to see who's coming through the door and start to listen for the sounds. It was a very poignant, and sounds that never came, because there was never anybody there. There was not a handgun in room 218. So we need to be clear that the hoax, while very real for our children and faculty impacted, was a hoax. The other one was a sense of anger from a young man, and I wasn't sure initially when I heard it what he meant, but I had the opportunity to really process it, and what he meant was he was angry about the level of safety he felt about coming to school and how that had been removed by somebody from the outside of our community, not even a student. Last we've checked, these phone calls are originating from a foreign country. Denver, Colorado went through it yesterday at East Denver High School. This hasn't stopped with South Fort Myers High School. It's occurring across the nation, and it's part of the unfortunate place we live right now where somebody thinks it's exciting to take people off the streets and put law enforcement in harm's way and disrupt the safety and security that our children feel when they arrive to a public school. Our kids are doing great jobs. They're reporting information. I appreciate the board's support with the idea of see something, say something. But the next most important thing for parents, and I will work on a set of parent guides with our counselors and other people, what they need to understand is that if they provide information, we can take that information and keep it private, and then move forward with the person who may or may not have a weapon or something on campus that's not supposed to be there. Our kids are our eyes and ears. They know more about what occurs in their building than as an adult we will ever know I told a lot of you, when you walk up to a set of middle school students gathered in the corner as an adult, they scatter. It's like mosquito repellent. I wish we could invent something for Southwest Florida that would work with mosquitoes as well. Not because they're telling some great secret, but they just don't want adults to know what they're up to.
Yeah.
What we have to build is a culture in our schools of see something, say something, and then the next level of depth of trust, which is if I do say something, my principal, my SRO, my teacher will keep my identity under wraps and private, and they will move forward with tracking down that rumor. And once we build that, I've built it in several school buildings I've in charge of, it will make us safer, but it will not make this school system immune. Our kids in our school buildings represent the community they come from. They are not hatched in the school district of Lee County. They are coming from our neighborhoods, our homes, and our environments to our school buildings. And they bring with us all the greatness of American society, and they bring with them also some of our society's ills. We must see this as a process that we tackle together. So that's where I will leave you today with both of those, knowing that we are diligently working behind the scenes, looking at video and other things, taking it apart. There is an interagency meeting this coming Thursday between our staff, Sheriff's Department, other first responders, to look at both situations, both incidents, and then we will provide a full public and shaded accounting for both this board and the greater public.
Thank you, Dr. Vernier. And at 5 o'clock, we'll gather, Ms. Gittens, sorry.
I just want to make one comment on that. On the next day after that incident, I was at a different middle school, and a student at that different middle school came up to the administrator to tell them they had something about something at another middle school. They went into full force and looking it up and contacting the other school, and within 10 or 15 minutes, the other school was notified of a situation, and within an hour it had been resolved. So it's not just in the one school, it is across the board. These kids, and like you say, they're in the community together. They, are on buses together. And it is very, very important for them to be able to feel comfortable enough to say something and to feel that trust is there, that nothing's going to happen to them. So I just wanted to mention that because I thought it was absolutely awesome that one school across town is helping another school across town.
And I will tell you that one of the things that and I should have said it right out of the gate, I'm so deeply grateful to our principals for taking the enormity of this task on to read into their cultures and their school buildings the expectation of see something, say something, and then make sure that they are providing that environment. That story is one. The other one I already told at a previous board meeting of a young person coming forward and saying, I saw something at my bus stop. I don't think it's at school, but you need to check. Not only did we check, but we were able to locate what was not a lethal weapon. It was another BB gun or pellet gun stored behind a tree at the bus stop because the kids knew they could bring it to the bus stop, but they shouldn't bring it to school. So there's a teachable moment in that as well, but another opportunity, and I'm hoping that more and more we have those situations where our kids take the opportunity to come forward because safety is their responsibility and it's their obligation. So I want to thank the principals and the leaders, the executive directors who helped me craft that message, making sure it got out into all of our buildings.
Thank you. And now, at 5 o'clock, we'll gather out in the lobbies for the Designs and Dreams Gallery Walk under the direction of Jason Tomaszewski and our art teachers, which is always a wonderful annual event, followed by our Action School Board meeting at 6 o'clock. And seeing no other business come before this board and hearing no objections, this meeting is adjourned.